Hello everyone. Today we are going to talk about the SPR. First, let's take the hype out of the SPR. The US lived about 100 years and went through World War I, World War II, went through the Vietnam War, the Korean War, and large part of the Cold War without an SPR. Yes, the Army has its own SPR, but that's a completely different thing. We are talking about the civilian SPR that was established in the 70s. So we went through all those major wars without the SPR. So those who are worried about security should remember that. Headlines like the SPR at its lowest in 40 years, Biden is draining the SPR, are just hype. Has no meaning. We still have about 350 million barrels of in the SPR. And the focus of researchers and politicians and congressmen and senators should be on the optimal level of the SPR. What is the optimal level of the SPR given the current situation and whatever forecasts or scenarios they want to have in the next 10 or 20 years? So you focus on the optimal, any other number basically is meaningless in terms of impact. The same idea applies to inventory, to commercial inventories. What is the optimal level for the refiners and others of commercial inventories? Is it 350, 500 million barrels, 800? What is it? So we need studies like that. Now I do these things. I have my own numbers, but I'm not going to talk about them in this video. The fact is, the SPR is a subsidy to the oil companies. I know some people may not like that, but they are actually a subsidy to the oil companies, so they do not lock up capital in additional oil inventories. As the SPR declines, companies have no choice but to raise their commercial inventories. In a sense, there is some certain type of substitution between the SPR and commercial inventory. So as the SPR declines, and that's within certain range, as the SPR declines, inventories rise, and if the Biden administration want to raise the SPR, we are going to see commercial inventories declining. And remember the following, when we talk about the hype, the Republicans who are accusing Biden of draining the SPR, they are the same Republicans who called for ending the SPR. They are the same Republicans who wanted to abolish the Department of Energy altogether. So they don't want the SPR in the first place. So blaming Biden on draining the SPR is a complete nonsense based on their history. However, the use of the Biden administration of the SPR was, let's say, at least unacceptable by the historical standards, but legally they can justify it no matter what. In general, again, we are still talking about the hype here, showing the massive decline in commercial inventories and the SPR has no meaning without showing the whole picture. Showing it, for example, from 2010 or from year 2000. They need to show at least from 2010. Any partial pictures, just showing the declines alone, is a violation, is misleading. It is a violation of compliance, and it could be a violation of the SEC rules. In this case, if those charts are coming from investment firms or financial institutions. So we cannot just show part of the picture showing the decline, say oil prices are going to go through the roof because of this decline, and forget the massive increase in inventories that happened before that. So it is very important to show the whole picture, as you can see in those charts. And you can see the difference in the way these charts are presented, because you can show a chart of the SPR where the decline is very severe and you give the impression that the SPR is empty, or you can show that, look, let's start the chart from zero, and you can see that we still have a large amount in storage. Now, the SPR was established as a reaction to the oil embargo that happened in October 1973. It started on the 17th, but it became official on the 19th of October. So we are at the 49th anniversary of the embargo as we speak. And it was established as a reaction to it after the International Energy Agency was established and required members to have strategic petroleum reserves. It was established for two reasons. First, to be used in case of disruptions. The word disruption here is very important, and to comply with the IEA International Energy rules. However, the requirements change over time until we know now from the Biden administration there are no rules anymore. And this is really ironic that the president can authorize it for fear of anything, including fear of higher prices, basically affecting economic growth. So just because of the perception itself that high oil prices can affect economic growth, the president can release the SPR, and that's enough justification these days. This won't fly years ago, but it happened. Now we know that the Biden administration decided in last March, to release 180 million barrels, and the impact of those releases is massive. And the way we measure it basically is this. You don't look at the decline in prices and say, well, prices were 130 in March and now they are 85, and therefore this difference is the impact of the SPR. That's not the way you measure it. You measure it based on what would prices be without the release of the SPR versus the actual price, and then you account for other variables that contributed to that, such as the increases from OPEC and non-OPEC members, etc., and various factors such as the decline in the expected demand, etc. But the idea here is the impact was massive because the release prevented prices from going above $140, and some people think probably it prevented them from going to $200. We don't know, but these are mathematical models, and you can get different results from them. The fact is, some people were using combining the decline in commercial inventories with the SPR and showing this massive decline, concluding that oil prices will increase. That was a complete nonsense. The SPR is one thing, commercial inventories are another, and they should be dealt with completely in different ways. And ironically, those who predicted higher prices because of that, they saw what happened. Since then, oil prices have been declining. The recent announcement by the Biden administration of releasing 15 million barrels a day is bearish. Any way you look at it, is bearish. However, which we have to remember that it is the last part of the 180 million barrels that have been announced in March, and people think, well, since this is going to end, therefore prices will go up. We'll discuss that in a few minutes. But the timing of the Biden announcement after the OPEC announcement of the cut, and you've seen the previous video that the OPEC cut is meaningless in terms of supplies because it has a very limited impact on global supplies, because production is one thing, supplies are another. But the timing of the Biden announcement was purely political, and but they were smart enough to say later that we will start in December after the elections, because if they started in November, it would have been very clear to everyone it influences the elections. So delaying it until December, that was smart of them to avoid that. If you look at SPR releases, there are 4 types of SPR releases. The first one, and that very small amount, is the test sales. That's when they conduct from time to time, they're required to do tests. They need to release certain amounts to make sure that everything is functional, everything is fine, etc. Usually these are small amounts, and they organize this with some companies, but the amount is very small, has no impact on the market. And then we have 3 others, all of them have an impact on the market. The second one, which is very important, is the mandated sales by the Congress. The Congress has mandated the sales since 2015, and we have several others after that. They mandated the sales of the SPR to cover the cost of the SPR and to renew the SPR and to supplement the budget. Those sales are significant. As you all know, that during the collapse in oil prices in 2020, President Trump stopped those sales, but then we went back and the government started selling them again. But the issue with sales here is very important, because those who think that the end of the current sale of the SPR at the end of this month or next month by the Biden administration is going to raise prices, think again. I'm going to tell you why in a minute. So we have the mandated sales by the Congress, and those mandated sales, by the way, if you are wondering how much, well, they are mandating over 350 million barrels, over 350 million barrels in the next 7-8 years. And the Biden administration basically have the authority to lump sum all of that together and just sell them if they want to. So we'll see whether the Congress will react, especially if there is a new Congress where the Republicans are the majority. We'll see if they can block that. But we will see how these things are going to work. But the idea here is we have mandated sale by the Congress. And then we have the exchanges. We've seen those exchanges all over. Every time we have a hurricane or a company has certain problems, we've seen them asking the government to release some oil, and then the government, the company will return it to the government, the same amount, the same quality, plus a certain amount, which is kind of like the interest on that. And then, and the most important, is the emergency sales. So this is the fourth one. The emergency sales are usually for major events, and those major events require massive withdrawals from the SPR. The first one happened during the Desert Storm in 1991, when during the liberation of Kuwait. Then in 2005 we have Hurricane Katrina. Then in 2011 we have the Arab Spring. And then Biden now, which is the largest release ever. Now, when we talk about, there are small releases, especially the exchanges, etc. There are numbers that are important here, because the Congress prevents the president from releasing oil if the SPR is below 252 million barrels, if I remember. But when it comes to emergency, there are no minimums, period. So there are no requirements from the Congress. Now I want you to focus on this. The SPR was established for two reasons: in case of emergency and to comply with the IEA, the International Energy Agency. What are the requirements of the International Energy Agency? That every member has to hold the 90 days worth of supplies. But 90 days of what? Of oil, not crude, oil, of net imports. So we have those keywords, oil and net imports. The US right now is a net exporter, and therefore the IEA rules do not apply in this case. So if they want to go to zero, they can go to zero. In fact, the only requirements right now that holds the Biden administration from selling the whole SPR are the technical requirements, because they need to have a base oil, base amount in every cavern to maintain the operations. So it's the only technical requirements here. Otherwise, there are no other requirements for the Biden administration. They can sell the whole SPR. But talking about this, let's remember the following. They can sell any amount. There is no requirements from the Congress under the emergency. They can sell any amount because there is no requirement from the IEA. And by the way, the IEA already suspended the rules anyway. So they can continue withdrawing from the SPR. But let's go back to the mandated releases from the Congress. We still have about 26 million barrels a day need to be sold. This has nothing to do with the 180. And Biden is going to use it if needed. Aside from that, they can do those exchanges under various circumstances. So they can still use additional SPR under the Emergency Act. they can still use the mandated releases, and they can still use the exchanges. That's why the end of the SPR may not be that bullish as some people think. Now let's move on and talk about various events related to that SPR, because this is very important to understand. What are the two major events in 2021? In 2021, there were two major events in the oil market. The first one is the major change in OPEC behavior. Something never happened before. Now, of course, we are talking about OPEC Plus. What we see here, what we are talking about, is the fact that OPEC historically, every time demand went up and prices went up, the countries, the large countries with spare capacity, infringed on the market share of others who couldn't increase production to meet their quota. So that's why no one was that serious about the quota system. And the quota system was a failure for most of the time. But now in 2021, we have a completely new game in town, that the biggest countries within OPEC or OPEC Plus refused to infringe on the market share of others despite the need for their oil, and they decided to stick to their quota. That is a major change in market structure, and that helped oil prices increase in 2021. So that's the first major increase, which means that they were really conservative with their spare capacity. Why we talk about spare capacity? Because we have spare capacity in the producing countries and we have the SPR in the consuming countries. Now, the second big event that happened in 2021 is that, yes, oil prices should have gone above $100 in 2021, but it was known from early days, even from 2018, that if oil prices are going to go over $75, China is going to use its SPR, and they have a lot of it. And they did. And they prevented oil prices from going above $100. So the only reason why prices did not go above $100 in 2021 was the use of the SPR by China. Again, we are not talking about Biden SPR or the US SPR. We are talking about China's SPR. And this is very significant for the future. As we speak, China's oil inventories, the SPR and the commercial, are higher than that of the United States. And they are going to use them when prices are going up. So it will happen. Now we move to 2022, and we have three major developments in 2022. We have the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the aftermath of that, and the sanctions, which affected, as you know, all energy markets. And we have the major release of 180 million barrels by the Biden administration, which has a very large impact on the oil market. And OPEC behavior continued to change along that change in the market structure, where we ended up, in a sense, a meeting of OPEC is not enough to understand what's going on. You need the three-leg explanation that I explained before in various spaces and various tweets. For those who are interested, they can refer to them or contact me. But the only way to understand OPEC right now is you need to focus on that three-step explanation. But the idea here is, well, okay, we already know what happened in 2023 with the SPR. We already know what happened in 2022 with the SPR. 2021 was for the Chinese. 2022 was for the Americans. So what about 2023? Now, we already know from the Biden administration, we have about 350 million barrels left. Yes, the Biden administration can continue using the SPR. Yes, the Biden administration can use the mandated releases and add about 26 million. Yes, they can do those exchanges. But this is not the big issue. People were counting on the recovery in China, and we are still waiting on the recovery from China. But whether it's going to happen or not, if prices are going to go higher than what they are today, China is going to use the SPR. In fact, it's been using the SPR in recent weeks. So China is going to use the SPR in a big way. So 2021 is going to be repeated in 2023, at least in the first half, especially if the reopening of China lead to some recovery. Although many people doubt that because there are too many problems. So between China SPR, the US SPR, the Congress mandated releases, and the exchanges, we have a lot of oil coming from those storage, etc. And the last issue that I want to talk about is the refill of the SPR. There are all kinds of talks about that. The clear facts are that the Biden administration is going to refill, or is going to have a partial refill of what they sold. They are not going to refill the whole thing. It does not make sense. And they are going to refill when prices are low. We already heard them talking about this range 67 to 72 in the futures market, etc. All of this, yes, they can have all the rules in the world, but all of this is a complete nonsense. When we talk about the SPR refill, there are certain questions we have to answer. And specifically, there are 3 questions. What is the amount of the refill? Second, at what prices? And the third one is, does it make sense to refill when you have to sell the mandated amounts by the Congress? So you sell from here and buy from here. So you can see where we can create the rules, but once we go on the ground, we have a completely different game here. We need to make sure that we don't have any more releases that are mandated by the Congress until we start refilling. Otherwise, just selling and buying at the same period does not make any sense. But when we look at the range and the idea that they are going to buy in the futures at a fixed price, is that fixed price too low, too high? We don't know. But either way, it's going to create many problems. What if we don't get to that price at all? What they are going to do, they are not going to refill the SPR. And by the way, they will be fine. And probably that fulfill what they've been talking about in Congress for a long time between Republicans and Democrats about having a smaller SPR, especially after the shale revolution. Because since 2010 until now, we added about 7-8 million barrels a day. That should be a substitute for some of that amount of the SPR. But can you imagine this, that the prices go to $40 and the Biden administration is buying oil for the SPR at 70 or 68. And everyone is saying Democrats are subsidizing fossil fuel. So you can see where the problems are. It's going to be a major political problem, and probably the Congress is going to create some new rules basically to negate that. So will not allow the government to buy at prices that are way higher than the market. Or imagine something else, okay? If they go for the contract, they sign the contract, and the Saudis crash the market, literally. And the Biden administration gets stuck, politically and economically. So there is a lot of risk involved in this case. But the major issue here, they kept claiming that is good for the producers, is good for US producers. Is it really? The SPR was designed to cover imports. And our imports right now are medium and sour. US shale producers produce light, sweet crude. And many of them already announced that $70 is not enough for them. And it's not attractive for them to hedge. So the Biden administration is not going to get it either on the price, and they are not going to get it on the quality. The only way basically they can get and refill the SPR if they deal with traders, not producers. And those traders are going to get them the oil. Guess from where? Saudi Arabia? Iraq? Yep. And if we have a nuclear deal by that time, we'll get it from Iran too. Why? Because it matches the imports that the US refiners need in this case. So it's not going to help US producers. It's going to help foreign producers and the traders in this case. And so you can see where the benefits are going. So the bottom line here is we have a lot of hype about the SPR, whether from the government, politicians, Congress, senators, on all sides, and we have some narrative pushers basically who are pushing certain narratives, etc. We have a lot of hype. The reality is we don't need 700 or 600 million barrels of SPR in the SPR. And we don't need a lot of light sweet crude in the SPR because we produce massive amount of it here in the United States, here in Texas. What we need is, if they are going to go for the optimal level, or it will be a partial refill, and it's going to be mostly imports, some probably from the Gulf of Mexico. We would have used some from California, but no more. But the idea here is, if they are going to reach the optimal level and they want to have a partial refill, it's going to benefit traders, it's going to benefit foreign producers, but it's not going to benefit shale producers. And we'll see you in another video. Thank you.